Okay, this is the Silt versus role-playing game writing contest results video. My name is Jason Cordova. I am one of the creators of the Silt versus role-playing game, along with Gabriel Robinson, who is also on the call. And I am also the creator of the games from which the game is mechanically derived, Brindlewood Bay, The Between, and Public Access. I'm the founder of the Gauntlet and a podcaster, and I'm very, very excited to do this today. Let's go around and meet everybody we have today. Since I've already talked about Gabriel, go ahead, Gabriel. You're here today as co-creator.
Yeah, Gabriel Robinson, I'm the co-writer of the Silt versus RPG and huge fan of the Silt versus. That's where it all started. Had a blast writing material for the game, and I've just been really excited to see everyone else write 80 something entries for this game. So I'm very excited to be here.
Hmm. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now let's go to our judges, starting with Alex.
Hello, my name is Alex Rabitsky. I am one of the aide-de-camps of the Gauntlet, I guess you could say, helping out around here, professional idea monkey. And I am also a big fan of the Silt versus like world and the setting, and was very excited to be judging this. I've not gotten to write for the Silt versus. I've written for other Gauntlet games, and this contest has made me realize how much I want to start writing for the Silt versus.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And our second judge is Mads.
Hi, I'm Madeline Colley, Mads for short, she, they pronouns. I play and run a lot of The Between and Trophy and Brindlewood Bay. I've written a mystery for Brindlewood Bay. I've judged previous writing contests, and I actually had a wonderful minor role in one of the Silt versus podcast episodes. So very, very, very happy to be here and see all of the wonderful writing that has been entered into the contest.
And finally, the person who is one of the people most responsible for us all being here today, our third judge, John.
Hello, I'm John. I write and sound design on the source material on the Silt versus podcast. So yeah, huge thank you to Gabriel and Jason for creating this awesome game based on the setting, and huge thanks to Mads for actually being in the show, which is brilliant. Yeah, really excited to be here and to be looking at all this amazing work.
Fantastic. So for folks who are watching this video and are not like quite up on what this is all about, we recently held a writing contest for the Silt versus role-playing game. This is something that the Gauntlet does for all of its games at one point or another. We always like hold writing contests just to get the community kind of involved in the sort of creation and creative aspects of role-playing games. Give people a chance, a sort of like low stakes chance to try their hand at game writing and to and just kind of see what's out there. And in fact, as the publisher of these games, I have sourced a lot of the stuff that we've published from these contests. Like we often find things that like fit really nicely with our publishing plans, and so in that sense, it's kind of a good thing for us too. But in general, the main thing about these contests is it's just for fun, and it's just for a chance. It's a chance to kind of create something with a like-minded group of people and get constructive feedback and things like that. But there is a contest aspect to it. There are runners-up and winners, and we're going to be talking about those today. The way this contest was structured is this was our biggest contest to date. We had 3 entry tracks that people could submit to. There was the Journey Scenes entry track. And if you're watching this, I'm assuming you have at least a baseline understanding of how the TSV RPG works, so I'm not going to go into that. But there was a Journey Scenes track. There was a Faith Sheet track. That's the first time we've done a contest with where player-facing material was something you could submit. And then we had an assignment track. And like Gabriel noted, we received like 82 entries in total or something like that, which is a really good number. And yeah, the creativity on display was incredible. What we're going to do today in this call is we're going to talk about a number of the entries. We're going to first start by talking about our spotlight picks. Now, each of the judges has chosen a spotlight pick from the various entries, and Gabriel and I have chosen spotlight picks as well. We're going to go through those. The spotlight picks are entries that that did not place or win, but we think that they're really cool in some way, and we wanted to highlight them for some reason. Then we're going to go through each submission track and do the runner-up and the winner of each track and talk about those in some detail. And so I think with that little brief overview of the contest, I think I want to just sort of first just talk about the contest generally. Particularly, I'd like to hear from the judges, and but also Gabriel, please chime in. What are your thoughts about how the contest went? Your thoughts about the entries? Anything that stood out to you? Any themes or any just anything that kind of like that kind of piqued your interest about this? Who wants to start?
Well, I'm happy to kick things off by saying that, so this is my second time judging a writing contest. I previously judged the public access writing contest alongside Mads, and that was already pretty fun. But considering we had more than, I think, like 20 over entries, like we had like 20 more than the last contest, and also getting to see the mix of journey scenes and faith sheets in addition to all the assignments has been really fun. I feel like the thing I was most excited for going into this writing contest, aside from like seeing the entries themselves, was seeing how people were going to take the setting and run with it. This was a thing we've talked about a lot in both the Silt versus game text itself and just around the Discord, is how much of the setting is there for you to fill the blanks and paint with your own brush and teach through play. And there's really this wonderful canvas to explore. And that was the thing I was most looking forward to, was seeing what people were going to bring to this world, like what ideas, what unexplored corners. And I was like really happy to see like a lot of things came into the mix that I didn't even expect or even think of initially. Some really fantastic ideas that I felt like not just showcase some incredible creativity and like writing capability, but overall showed just a lot of cool engagement with bringing people's own ideas to a pre-established world and not feeling like afraid or holding themselves back to do so. So it's been really cool to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I was the thing that stuck out to me as I was reading the entries was how cleverly and how ably the people who participated were able to make their entries feel like the Silt verses, right? Like that's probably not easy to do, right? It's not easy to take an established setting, especially one that has that like we've said many times in other places, is so familiar and yet so utterly bizarre. And like to take this setting and to create something out of whole cloth in most cases, and have it feel like it connects up with the setting. What I thought was really cool. Mads, what were your general thoughts on it?
I just again enjoyed looking at all of the different takes on the different tracks, and I mean, always impressed by the amount of great thoughts and ideas and writing. But what was interesting was because it was based from some set lore. I mean, it's very much vibes when you're listening to the Silt verses, of course, but then also reading through the game, and we had more entries that we got the impression, at least Alex and I did, it's like, okay, you haven't quite played like Car from Brindlewood enough, or you're bringing in things from other systems that you don't quite get that particular thing, so that may not mechanically work. I mean, I get it, but again, I mean, just for the creativity of being able to just bring it in and again just try these different ideas. And the darkness in the Silt versus RPG writing was, I mean, all of the Car from Brindlewood games have some sort of darkness in them, but this is a different
horror.
Yeah, this is a very different kind of flavor. I mean, like even from some of the ones that push the boundaries in public access, even more so now when we're looking at it through the Silt versus eyes and perspective, and I totally accepted that. I mean, like I know, from judging the public access contest, for instance, there were some things that I was like depending on the table, they probably going to have some hesitation over this. But then with looking at these entries, I'm like, you know what? They're going for it. They're just enjoying the world and steeping themselves in the lore. And that's what we want. We want people to feel like they are in it, even if maybe some details are a little bit off, whatever. I mean, vibes were all over the place, and it was
Impeccable, yeah,
great.
and all over the
Yeah,
place, yeah.
it was great. It was
This
just
was
like,
a
oh,
thing. Yeah,
exciting.
this was a thing that Mads, John, and I frequently like talked about when we were deliberating over the winners last week. Was like like the entries that have something to say and they're saying it with their whole chest. Like the voice is out there, even if it's something is not exactly the strongest from either a writing or even a mechanical standpoint. Like the entries that stood out to us are the ones that were like they have planted their feet and they are declaring
They're
what
taking
they
a big
are
swing.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in these contests we always tell the judges like you have three criteria, you know, that you can interpret however you wish and balance and weigh however you wish. But the three criteria are playability, creativity, and quality of writing. And I love those three criteria because it means that even if you're not so well versed in, say, the mechanical like elements of CFB games and therefore maybe can't get the playability part right, you can still have a really good shot in the contest with creativity and quality of writing, and vice versa or whatever, right? Like you know, there's different ways you can make your entry shine, and because you all have the freedom to judge like and weigh those different criteria however you want, you can kind of like you basically, it opens up different lanes for people to kind of like slot in and to have a shot, you know, in this judging that is kind of fundamentally subjective, right? But like with a little bit of like guardrails of objectivity there with those three categories. John, as the creator of or the one of the creators of the source material, how did you feel about the contest entries?
I just filled with absolute joy, to be perfectly honest. I hope I never take for granted how it feels when you see someone stepping on the bones of what you've written to get somewhere really exciting and really creative that they've come up with themselves. It's just, it feels so wonderful to see people using the base of the setting that we created and then take it in so many wild and unexpected directions. And obviously, compared to Mads and Alex, I'm relatively mechanically clueless, so I can just enjoy the vibes, the pure vibes. No, I obviously we have to pick one spotlight each, but I could probably have picked a dozen. I really adored how so many of the entries were plain hoots, whether it was wacky races style, car rallies, a bit of fun social satire, Renaissance fair parodies, and then we had some assignments and faith sheets and journeys that were doing something that I found incredibly moving and really powerful, and dealing with hard topics, whether it's domestic abuse, whether it's self-harm, whether it's all these things that we in the show tried to use a bit of a fantastical, weird, absurdist setting to talk about these issues and explore these issues with sincerity and compassion, and to see these works doing just that in areas that we never thought to touch. It's so incredible, and really just absolutely feel appreciative and grateful for all the brilliant work that people have put out there.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way whenever we do these contests because, like, for public access, especially, you know, that was a homegrown setting that I made, and people did things that were like I completely did not see, and they expanded the setting in ways that I didn't foresee, and it was really delightful. Gabriel, you had a slightly different vantage point here because I know you were actually helping a lot of folks with their entries and giving a lot of feedback and advice. I was too, and we did the workshops, of course. What was your feelings on how this went?
Yeah, I mean, two big thoughts here for me. Number one, like as the co-writer, who's done most of the assignments and faith sheets for like the base game so far, like my approach, my main concern has always been, does this feel like the Silt verses? Like, not that it has to exactly match the lore, but if someone picks this up, are we giving them a good intro to like what this world is about? And that's always been my main concern. But it was fun to see folks who across the spectrum either knew the show really well or maybe didn't at all, and maybe weren't as constrained in that way and just kind of went wild with ideas. So I really respected the range and boldness of everyone's entries. And the other thing that struck me was just seeing in the Discord, like how often and how extensively everyone was helping each other out with feedback. You know, I got my start writing for RPGs through one of the Gauntlet contests. Like Trophy was what got me started. And I was just kind of working in a corner, just toiling away, hoping it was good enough, you know, but it was really inspiring to see, you know, more seasoned writers, brand new writers, all just kind of collaborating and having that free flow of information and just encouragement. So that was really something that struck me about the contest.
This is a total tangent, but if you go back and look at that first trophy contest and see all the people who were involved in it and who like placed or won and like what they do in role-playing games now, that contest kicked off a lot of people's careers in this industry, including some people who are now like a really, really big deal in this industry, right? So yeah, these contests are great in that way. They really can be like I think they're mostly for fun and there's a pleasure just in doing it, but they also can be like this lane to like get involved in role-playing games, which is really exciting. So why don't we go ahead and go to Spotlight Picks? Okay, Spotlight Picks. These are the ones that we wanted to highlight. There was something about these entries that we thought were worth talking about, and we have each chosen our Spotlight pick from any of the 3 categories. And so why don't we go with we'll start with our judges' spotlights, and we'll start with Mads. Mads, which was your Spotlight pick?
My Spotlight pick was the Faith Sheet, The Wandering Child. And I don't know if you want me to say who it's by, since we now know.
Yeah. You can tell us. Yeah. I've given the judges the names of the entrants now. They didn't have it when they were judging. So yeah. But yeah, who wrote that one?
Katie Campbell.
Katie Campbell, awesome. Really good Faith Sheet. It's so sweet, but also dark and eerie. What you love about it? Well, what's it about first?
So it's basically, as a parent of the wandering child, you both worship and nurture your God. What parent doesn't feel that way about their child at some point or another, unless it's truly, truly terrible. But it wanders from wandering child. It goes from finding a purpose in what caused you to find your God in the first place, usually something about loss and grief, and again, as a parent, I can only imagine, and then takes you through the different steps, the different verses, and then the steward of the wandering child is basically one who has these powers associated with the God itself, nurturing the child, providing playmates for the child, which could be creepy as hell. And then
that kick
also,
the can move is so dark. Oh my God.
Extremely dark.
It's dark, but so good, right?
Yeah, it is
good.
To me, it's very good. And we kind of had a little tiny debate about this when we were judging, and I'll just go over that in a minute. But I just want to lead into final prayer first. The final prayer is just so fitting because essentially it speaks to the whole empty nest syndrome that a parent can have when their child leaves the nest. But in this case, the parent, the steward, essentially becomes the dwelling place for the God. But the one thing that kicked it for me was the fact that the other players, the other characters give a detail about why this is inspiring or horrifying to them. So their perception through their character's eyes, what this means, what that final prayer means or looks like. And that is just the most horrific thing of all, because again, what parent thinks they're sacrificing so much for their children and doing all this stuff, and then thinking they're making the ultimate give it up for my kid, and then other people are like, ugh, why did you do that? Or I don't understand that. Or, oh, I can totally get it. I mean, that's just so incredible of you to do that. And it's very polarizing. So again, I just really love this for all those different things. And then the debate with the kick the can was because of, yes, it's extremely dark. You're essentially taking a side character and sacrificing them,
infantilizing them, and
right.
Then sacrificing them,
and then, right, turning them into a younger self, and then having them as a playmate for your child. It is very, very dark, I will admit, but I think, and I'm thinking of this as a player as well. I mean, I think there's a way to spin it to make it almost sympathetic, where you could take a side character that's at their last nadir and then turn it into something where you're helping them help your God. And so it's I turned it into something
dark. It's still really dark. Yeah.
Hey, you can be dark and tender. You can be dark and horrible. Okay. You know how I play,
love
all
it.
right?
Yeah, oh no, I love it. I think it's so good. I read that and I was like, oh shit, like I love this. This is so good. The whole thing has like it actually really does. I actually got like a really strong feeling of not so much thematically, but I got a really really strong feeling of like Wicker Man and Midsommar, like this idea of like people who are, because if you look at like those communities in Wicker Man and Midsommar, like they seem like they're living their best lives, and what they're doing, like in a certain sense, is kind of sympathetic, right? Like they come across sympathetically, but like the outcome is like really really grim, and I really love it. It was so good. Anybody else have any thoughts on this one before we go to the next spotlight pick? It was a solid pick, solid pick.
I just want to throw in that Mads' passion about this playbook did like fully open my eyes to like things about it that I didn't necessarily catch on my first reading. And oh my God, I just cannot echo enough how much I want to either in the player seat or the keeper seat be there for that final prayer, because that is so good.
It's grim. It's grim. Fantastic. Okay, so let's go on. In the interest of time, let's move on to the next spotlight pick, which is we'll go with Alex. Tell us about your spotlight pick. What is it and who wrote it?
Yeah, my spotlight is an assignment. It is The Keeper of the Temple by Steph Infection. Which I'm happy to talk about it because I am kind of enamored with it. Absolutely. So basically, at the top of the list here, the question is simply, what would a tabletop role-playing game look like in the world of the Silt Verses? Because The Keeper of the Temple is about a role-playing game called Saints and Sisters that is being played across the territories of the peninsula, and a village, the village of Kelnsey, has recently become a miraculous zone, this area that either was or currently affected by a god, more than just a general inhabitants of a god. This is a place where some ongoing powerful miracle is manifesting, and a new god was birthed by a group playing the game in this village, turning the entire village into a massive obsidian like ziggurat temple dungeon that is now cordoned off from the rest of the world, and the agents need to go in there to like basically purge everything inside there and like kill monsters and get to the center of this maze dungeon at its heart.
There's so much metatextual nonsense in this assignment. I really love it. I particularly loved the. There's a lot of things, but I really like how the questions and opportunities feel like a progression in a game. Like you're working up to the final boss, which I think is like super super cool because you have to defeat each of these three saints. Love the saints too. They're very trophy like actually. The monsters and traps are fun. Really fun. Also, it's really weirdly Annihilation like. I don't know if anybody picked up on that, but it is. Yeah,
this
it feels
was
like
one
Annihilation.
This was one of two entries that during our deliberations we were like, this has big Annihilation
big
vibes.
Annihilation vibes. Yeah. It's really solid. Love it. Great pick. Any other thoughts on this particular entry, Keeper of the Temple?
Yeah, I just want to throw out there real quick just to finish off no, it's all good. Is just finish off. One of my favorite things about
Oh, you muted Alex right as you were saying that.
Oops. One of my favorite things about this whole scenario, aside from all like the tabletop like meta commentary, is like, on a broader level, the concept, and this is a thing we talk about a lot in our judging of like, when you're bringing ideas from our world and putting them in the Silt Verses, the best possible thing you can do to make an entry like really either just stand out, but also just go the extra mile is not just graft one thing onto the other. Like, what would this look like in the world of the Silt Verses? And having it be a game in a world where faith manifests and turn real, it's so fun. Like the idea is like the bosses are the players who have been like sanctified in their own imagination. It's so much fun. I love this so much.
I'm here for it. Yeah, Gabriel, John, sound like you both had thoughts.
I was going to say, I like the way it explores the idea of miracles in this setting, which are devastating, which are the worst thing that could happen. And just the idea that you could accidentally invoke or cause some sort of devastating event by playing a game. So it was perfect for the studying the Silt Verses.
I really admired the just the doubling down of you're slaying monsters, like dungeon delve all the way, right? And then I was really happy with the conditions that the saintly sisters bestow. Your skin blooms with her flowers, or it seeks your light eternally, or your mind in chains. I mean, so poetic, but yet very dark still.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I just said during judging, it reminded me a lot of the celebrated adventure A Wizard by Ripley Station, where you have the generic
yeah.
fantasy overlay and then some
Mhm.
very, very beautifully blunt body horror descriptions
Yeah.
of what's actually going on underneath. And I adored that. I love how it was written.
Yeah, Wizard's great. Fantastic. Okay, John, what is your spotlight pick?
I went with a faith sheet, and it's one that I really felt quite special to me, and I think for all three of us, it was kind of up there amongst the top picks. So I thought it deserved a bit of a shout out, and that's Babel, and that is by
Sasha Irfanian Dow did Babel. Yeah.
I think we have a frozen John for a moment.
Yeah, no, I think we lost John for a second.
Mhm.
Well, until John gets back, I will.
He invoked the wrong.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
You should have said Babel. I know that was the problem. I know.
Babel
We'll
says.
give John.
Babel says.
We'll give John a minute to come back, but I will say that obviously Babel is inspired by the. Oh, John, we lost you for a second. Sorry, I was just.
Yeah, sorry. I could hear all of you, and I was just like, "Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me?"
Babel by Sasha Irfanian Dow. Love it. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. So this one was really special to me because it was an adaptation of the show, and Babel appears in the first season when, God knows why, I decided I really wanted to do a shout out to Not I by Samuel Beckett, which is the play where famously there's just a giant mouth and it whispers very fast, very staccato for a solid 40 minutes, babbling, as it were. And I love the idea of having a phone sales rep who has become so desperate for connection and meaning that they've effectively become addicted to this god on the other end of the phone line that whispers something to them that only they can hear. And it's a very divisive episode, rightfully, because it was an ambitious idea, but we didn't really have the sound quality to pull it off.
I find it's the one that people are either in or out at that point.
Yeah,
like when you listen to the Babel episode, you're either like, "Oh, this is totally my jam," or you're like, So hopefully more on the former.
Some people just the whispering gets to them; they literally can't concentrate, and that's absolutely fine. For some people, I think the sound quality, we just couldn't quite get it right at that early stage. We were still pretty crude, but like you say, the people that get it, and they love it. But it's a niche episode. It's about a devolved little gremlin person in an abandoned call center, scuttling around in the vents, leaving offerings of severed ears to this god on the other end of the line, and then rather sadly just dying at the end alone without getting the moment of connection they sought. And it's not something I ever anticipated anyone would want to take and turn into an RPG class effectively. And even when I saw it come up, I thought there's no way this is going to work. And what surprised and delighted me was that it thoroughly does. It's a lovely and beautiful homage to what we did in the show, but it also works perfectly. And I can see it being such a brilliant addition to any table where it's telling the story of someone who's desperate for connection, who receives whispered blessings and secrets from payphones they pick up on the way on their journey, and ultimately who becomes more and more isolated from other people as they become more and more addicted to this one voice that offers meaning. I thought it was beautifully done, and I could see it being tons of fun to play, and really, really astonished that Sasha made it work. So well done, Sasha.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I'll say from the sort of like game side of things, one thing I really, really admired about this entry is there's a really beautiful restraint in this faith sheet. I think that a lot of people will maybe like rely on hard mechanics in order to like convey the fiction of their playbook or whatever. This is true of all games, not just this contest or this game. But what Sasha does in this one is it just relies on like simple narrative outcomes that are themselves complicated, that don't require any particular like mechanical like scaffolding, which I think is really, really clever. And it's a type of game design restraint that I always really admire. Like, for example, the core move, the way you kind of like get access to it is you have to give Babel these sacrifices of human ears. There's no take an extra condition. There's no go do this, go do that. There's no like, oh, mark this verse or do that. There's no like hard mechanical stuff. It's just you got to cut somebody's ear off and give up an ear. And that is going to create problems on its own. It doesn't need any other mechanical scaffolding. And so I really, really like that. That said, I do think there's a couple of moves that, like, if I was publishing it, I would juice up a little bit because I do think they need a little bit of juice. But I agree that it's quite a task they set for themselves to do Babel. And I thought they really nailed it. Any other thoughts on Babel, Gabriel?
Yeah, well, I'm just like John, just happy to see Babel featured. In our base game, we have 2 face sheets that are based purely off of one episode of the show. One of them, Sweet Jolly Crunch Tooth, is only mentioned in a monologue, and there's many other possible face sheets that could be drawn from the show. So I was glad to see folks doing that. I also liked the way the core move was described, where it's just very much on theme, where you say to the table, Babel says, and then this sort of oracular weirdness was very on point for Babel.
Yeah, it was good. It was solid. Okay, let's go now to our game creator picks, our spotlight picks. Gabriel, what's your spotlight pick?
My spotlight pick is Man in the Music Box by Calliope O'Neill.
I love this one. I love this one.
Yeah.
This was like top of the pile for me. It was way, way up there. I loved it. What'd you love about it? Or tell us what it's about, first of all.
Sure. Yeah, it's basically about a saint, a radio saint in this sort of strange number station that is issuing orders that might sort of activate people to go on missions. It's got this weird, spy thriller, espionage kind of feeling to it. It's got a lot of good layers, which is how I like to write assignments, where here's the threat, here's a kind of conflict, here's other factions and how they're involved. So it has a lot going on, and it feels like it could seamlessly fit right into the setting. I felt like the writer is very aware of the Silt versus setting. There's a lot of nice nods to the sort of lore. We have a Silt versus, a Trawlerman follower named Reeves just hanging out. All these little subtle nods that were fun. But it had the atmosphere of paranoia and this really unique approach to this danger that this saint is speaking through the signals, and at any time a radio could come on and could just like activate something in you, and a lot of mechanical ways that was backed up. This keeper reaction was really fun. So basically, if a player rolls a miss, there's a way of bringing this in and giving you conditions and then making you this asset of the man in the music box. But I liked that I could see someone writing these kind of themes and it still being kind of simplistic and saying, there's these military things that are going on. We want to shut down the station. People are still, carrying out these missions. But then you have this whole faction of these amateur, almost like this whole cult around this radio saint. Interacting with them is really cool. So yeah, the setting just overall felt really rich. The mood, the atmosphere, I really enjoyed. I could see that being just really fun to play at the table. I got a couple of quotes that are just really beautifully written that I enjoyed. Truth be told, the man in the music box doesn't particularly care who is giving the orders or to whom, only that they are delivered and dutifully carried out and that he gets to sing. We have a side character, enters a trance-light state and begins to methodically recite a series of seemingly random numbers. When snapped out of it, they hurriedly leave.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
Claiming to have just remembered something they need to do. And then another, a person twisted into the shape of a radio antenna. What's left of their head hums a tune and repeats a string of numbers in an agonized, terrified whisper.
It's such a great combination of like number station mystery stuff, which is a trope of like paranormal mystery, media. So I love that. But it's also like kind of Tinker Tailor a little bit. It's got like you said, it's got that paranoia vibe. The vibes in this are so impeccable. I was really, really into it. So good. I also picked out a couple of those moments that you quoted. I had those in my notes too. Those are so good. Any other thoughts on Man in the Music Box? An excellent pick. Then let's go to my creator pick, which is, I chose a journey scene actually. And I chose, I've got to get the name really quickly. What is the name, Jason? Oh, An Introduction to Cloistering. This is by Jack Hargreaves. And the basic idea here is people are going to rest stops, rest areas, and they're engaging in like taboo, illicit ritual practice with each other, right? One on one. And obviously, it's, or maybe not obviously, I don't know, but it's pretty clearly a metaphor for like, you know, like what gay men used to do in the 80s and 90s and 70s, and you know, like of meeting in rest areas to have illicit sex, because that was one of the only places you could do it, right, for a lot of like closeted men back in the day. And I really, really like this because, well, as a gay man, like I know the history of what queer people had to do, you know, to like, you know, the things they had to do. And, but also I really like that. I think Silt versus stuff is most fun when something that we recognize from the real world, some historical thing or cultural thing or something like that, is taken and then Silt versified, right? And given this like kind of like ritual like overlay, this god overlay. And I really, and so so that really spoke to me. So it kind of spoke to me from a sort of like queer history and queer culture way, but also like you know, kind of taking that and shaping it and making it into a Silt versus thing. I just thought it was really clever, really, really solid. And that was my spotlight pick. Fabulous spotlight picks, everyone. Let's now go to our runners-up and winners in each of the submission tracks, starting with Journey Scenes. And the runner-up for Journey Scenes, Alex, who was it?
It was Gift by Aaron Hollander.
Yes. Give us just a quick rundown what it's about.
So basically, in driving across the peninsula, you may encounter a hermit who has stationed himself atop like I believe it's like a wooden pole or something like that, and is just sitting down there communing beneath the stars. And each time you pass this hermit, something about them has changed, slowly altering and becoming sanctified. And there are offerings piled up nearby. And each time you pass, you can choose to maybe give an offering to this hermit, in which case they will bestow you with something in turn.
It's really eerie, right? It's really eerie, but also like kind of like beautiful in that sort of like ritualistic way that this setting is often beautiful. Yeah, I really, really loved it. Mads, John, why did you all pick this as the runner-up? What spoke to you about it?
Looking at my notes, body horror. This was one of the ones that, like, you know, again, like my initial reservations before I started really thinking about it and going, hey, it's the Silt versus universe. It's like it's all up for grabs. So like, you know, on initial pass, it was like that whole mortification, mutilation thing. But then, you know, it was presented as, oh wait, this is like a souvenir stop. Duh. I mean, you know, of course he's going to be, you know, giving some kind of souvenir, but from himself. So it makes perfect sense. And then I think let me just take a quick peek at this.
It's so Americana, isn't it?
Yes,
like,
yes. I mean,
so
like
Americana, yeah.
Tchotchkes, you know, like
Yeah.
we're gonna get the keychain, the shot glass, the magnet, but instead we're getting a tongue, a tooth, you know, an eye. You know, it's all fine. It's all good. It's a reminder.
John?
What I adored about the gift was the fact that we were looking at a lot of the journey scenes because it's a horror RPG, it's a horror setting. A lot of them would follow that format of you pass by a first time and something's a little bit wrong. You pass by a second time and something's definitely seeming a bit off now. You pass by a third time and here comes the punchline. Something really horrible is there. But what I really admired about the gift was it actually ran the gamut from being this very sorrowful, lonely act of self-mutilation to social satire, commercialism coming in. By the third time, the the custodians pass by. And I adored that tone shift. I adored how beautifully it worked as a progressive narrative and how it managed to fit in both the sadness and horror of the setting, but also the satirical elements as well so powerfully.
You know, I have to say, in some senses, I was reading through all these entries, I actually kind of think, in some ways, I actually think the journey scenes are some of the most impressive entries because we gave them such a tight word count. They had a really, really tight word count. And to convey like so much theme and meaning in such a small space is not easy to do. And I agree that the gift is excellent. Congratulations to Aaron for being the runner up. And John, what was the winning journey scene?
The winning journey scene was The Town of Erstwhile by Sarah Bolling.
Someone we have seen here in this position before. Judges didn't know that, but Sarah won the equivalent category in our last contest. So Sarah, very notoriously objectively good at writing in a small space. So
I will say,
congratulations.
I did not know, obviously when this did not know who I was judging. I read this one and I'm like 70% sure this is Sarah Bolling.
Sarah's writing style is so like you could pick, like her writing style is so particular and you always get it, but it's good. So Town of Erstwhile, John, give us just the basic breakdown. Like, what's it about?
Town of Erstwhile is a town that is slipping backwards into fog, effectively. It is a town that is slowly being forgotten. And so we have from Sarah a very beautiful and powerful, tight piece of writing where the custodians pass through the town, and each time some of it is being lost and fading away. And so it's contained, it's very, very tight, like I said, and I think just it works so beautifully for a memorable, melancholy, very eerie journey sequence.
Agree completely, with a fantastic little special rule at the end too. Love that special rule, which I have to remind myself. I have a note that I really loved it, but I can't remember what it does. I just remember like, oh, that's really cool.
It lets you unmark a verse, I believe,
right.
And then it's because then you will have to re-narrate it differently. And
you have to do it differently,
is,
right? Yeah,
memory is strange that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the perfect ending line for the journey scene. Memory is strange that way, and it's all about memory in the paint the scenes leading into the recall a time, because obviously paint the scenes are about the location itself. And then the recall a time is like, when did this particular thing happen to you when you were trying to, for regret or trying to remember correctly, or you're confronting your inevitable end. I mean, it's just damn beautiful.
In some sense, it's kind of a perfect journey scene because the journey phase in general is about wistfulness and flashbacks and memory, and so it's kind of nice to have it like sort of that idea almost like personified in this town, right? Like kind of given life in this town. Alex,
just to give it a particularly high compliment, I think that the Town of Erstwhile might be one of the best examples of this existential horror that has been done in the Silt versus period, because there truly is the helplessness of this is great, because like there's nothing you can do. You pass through this town, each time you do, most of it's gone. It is utterly indifferent to your passing, and you will experience the horror of it completely vanishing from memory and existence. It's so good.
Fantastic.
I just want to call attention to the last recall of time. When did you first confront the inevitability that someday the world will forget you?
Oh, so good.
How many of us are just like, God damn.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. That's a personal like horror of mine. I'm like weirdly obsessed with like, will people remember me? Like, I just have that like as a thing because of some health scare I had a few years ago. And yeah, that really resonated with me in a big way. Like it was very, very, very impactful. Okay, well, this is fantastic. I would like I'm going to give us a chance to take a quick 3-minute bio break if we need it. We'll come back and we'll dive into the next track, which is Faith Sheets, I think is next. Okay, let's dive into our Faith Sheet runner-up and winner. Alex, who is the runner-up Faith Sheet?
The Faith Sheet runner-up is Relentless Rider by Raymond Rich.
This one is so good, and I am dying to publish it. I love it. Tell us about Relentless Rider.
So Relentless Rider takes the god itself is essentially a god a courier god, one might say. The playbook itself here, or the faith sheet itself, let me pull up the opening text here, because it was a wonderful bit of world building. The sacred couriers of the relentless rider were once heralded as noble loners bringing news from afar and correspondence from loved ones at great personal risk. This is an order and a god that has fallen out of fashion in the modern age with the advent of radio and other more efficient modes of communication. The relentless rider, the faith sheet itself, puts you in the shoes of essentially a courier caught between two worlds, modernism and traditionalism. And basically, the whole playbook can be summed up as trying to be the most efficient postman in the world to terrifying degrees. These moves are so fucking good.
They're so good. I'm going to just say it before you guys tell me why you picked it. That core move is probably one of the best PBTA style moves I have ever seen. It is so damn good. We'll get into that, but like, why? I know why you chose this as a runner-up, but I'm dying to know, like, what was your thinking behind this one, Mads? Like, what really spoke to you about it?
Of course, now I have to look at my notes. Okay, here we go. Yeah, the moves essentially are amazing. Like, not only from the core move itself, but I mean, like, from the other moves that this faith sheet is able to do. There's the nostalgia for tradition, but yet the steed, and that's the core move. The steed changes as the courier goes through their journey. My question was, like, when I was looking at this, was what happens when they're more machine than organic? Does that break the tradition? I mean,
let's
like,
just talk about that move real quick.
Yeah.
So that people have the context, if you haven't looked at it yet. Basically, this courier faith, the character has a steed. It starts on one of either two ends of a spectrum. It is either a motorcycle or it's a horse, and every time you use the move, it gives you some benefit whenever you use it. Every time you use the move, you mark it one step closer to the other end. So the horse becomes more mechanical, or the motorcycle becomes like this biomechanical flesh thing. And then in the end, ultimately, you have to put it down, which is really dark. And that's, oh God, so good. Like, every part of that move is singing for me. Actually, all the moves are so good. That one where, they ride into town on a storm. They bring a storm.
Heavy metal thunder.
So good.
For sure. It's like every t-shirt that everybody has had, like, in a heavy metal band.
Great. Yeah.
So.
I gotta say though, like, one of my favorite moves, I mean, aside from the core one and the heavy metal thunder, was the sign seal delivered, which is basically where it's just like, you can whisper a message to be delivered to a god, and like, you stamp their forehead, stitch their lip shut, and then deposit them in some hole in the earth to like mail it to the god.
Oh, it's so dark, and they can get that person, that sacrifice can get loose, and like, yeah, it was so grim. John, we were just gushing here, John, but what did you love about it?
No, I mean, I'd love to gush as well. There were so many faith sheets that I think we all loved, but this one, it felt like it was filling a very clear and obvious gap in the setting and how the setting interacts with Americana in many ways. This kind of courier figure, yes, who's also a bit of a cowboy, a bit of a biker, sort of an errant questing knight figure who happens to either be on a motorcycle that's getting increasingly fleshy or a horse that's getting increasingly mechanical. And I adored that. I adored the idea that you might have to take this horrible steed you've created out the back and shoot it at some point along your journey. Tons of fun, and like you said, the dramatic elements and the heroic elements underpinning it, but also ready to be undermined, were just fantastic.
We talk a lot about, like, of the core playbooks that are available right now from us, how the Watcher in the Wings playbook, or the Faith Sheet, is the one that, like, really, like, wildly alters reality, like, just completely reshapes and alters reality. And this one does too. Like, this one, the player can bring a storm to town, like, and it's altering reality in order to have this, like, moment, like this dramatic theatrical moment that, like, that is, it's a little kitsch, it's really high drama, like, it's so good, man, it's amazing.
It has a great faith poem at the end. I'd love to read this quote.
The poem is great. Yeah,
it's gorgeous. Final prayer: a knock in the night. Mine voice is strained and whisper worn. Mine hooves are cracked and split. Mine wings are tattered and ill wind torn. Mine eyes are caked with grit. And yet I arrive before the morn on your doorstep, candlelit. The harbinger's hymn. Gorgeous.
Bravo, Raymond Rich. We're just sitting here gushing. People need to play this. This needs to be a faith sheet in the game. It's so cool. Any other thoughts on this? Any coherent thoughts? I feel like I'm just leading the gushing brigade here.
I had a little bit of hesitation for this, which is why it wasn't like, on my winner in my winner track. Just because, like, although the final prayer poem was beautiful, I was just wondering about the finality of it in terms of the person, the sacred courier, visiting a community and creating their own sacred courier order. Like, it went from, like, this journey that you had with your steed and how the steed changes, and then, like, your journeys into towns and delivering messages, and then it goes into, like, well, you're creating, like, this new order. And I'm like, I know it's in the beginning, but I just feel like it didn't necessarily, at least for me, didn't quite tie into, wait, where's this order coming from? Like,
no, I get that. I think it does stand out from other final prayers in that it's not like horrifying, and it's not like it doesn't alter the geography, like a lot of them do. And so I kind of get that. I get that that outcome. It also kind of implies that, like, the character's ongoing when they're kind of not supposed to be. Like, I get that criticism. I think it's it's interesting. It's definitely something worth, like, pondering.
And I will say, and I will say, honestly, we shared the same criticism, and ultimately, though, just the core strength of all the moves and, like, the fiction and the world building it presented carried it through.
Yeah,
I think the final prayer, the best looking thing for it is to have, because you've had this struggle between, biomechanical kind of like horrors and stuff, become this part organic, part mechanical, extremely efficient courier, inhuman saint, and then kind of leave it on a, like, into the sunset, but in a horrifying kind of way of, like, going to deliver terrible messages, and, like, in, like, a Piper kind of way, like newly inspired messengers will follow in your wake into, so, like,
or it should have the complete opposite energy of the playbook, and they just become like a weird mailbox or something.
Oh, that's also really good. Yeah,
kind of like Wandering Child, like, turns into an edifice. I mean, like, they could turn into, like, something stationary, because that could be a complete glowing reversal,
it's like the
of
opposite,
right, their journey. Like, instead of journeying, oh, sorry, you're stuck. And that would be horrifying.
Yeah. But that little criticism aside, the face sheets, it's really dope. Okay, fabulous. Let's move on to now the winner of the faith sheet track. A really fascinating pick, I thought. Alex, who won?
The winner of the faith sheet track is Dear, Dear Husband by Chaotic.
Dear, Dear Husband. I think this is probably the darkest entry of all the entries.
This is the darkest
entry. Incredibly dark and bleak. Alex, what's it about?
Dear, Dear Husband is a look into a god of basically domestic abuse, and what that might look like in this world. The Dear, Dear Husband is an unusual god. He was born through the needs of the peninsula for a stable home life. However, gods are born alone and rarely, if ever, connect with another god. So for a period, the god was worshipped alone, and marriages started to get worse. Murder and divorce were up. So instead of focusing on why that was, the logical conclusion was that the problem was that the Dear, Dear Husband didn't have a wife. And that becomes your character. You are one of the chosen wives of the Dear, Dear Husband. Gender, it can be it can be totally genderless, but essentially you are a worshiper of this really fucked up god of love. And this playbook deals a lot with domestic partner abuse, sexual coercion, general sexism, like degradation of, like, personal value. It was, bar none, the darkest, most fucked up bleak entry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Incredibly bleak. And yet it won not just because we felt like it was just so fucked up. We not just because we liked the mechanics, but because the two biggest pillars, I'd say, for it, at least from what I recall us talking about, was one, this thing had a theme and an opinion on the social issue of domestic partner abuse, got on top of the mountain and screamed it full voice. It doesn't feel ham-fisted, but it feels just blunt enough that it works. It doesn't feel like it's just fucking around with a concept too big for it. And then two, just an incredible idea of like, I didn't think I would need to perceive, oh, this is what a domestic abuse god would look like in this setting, but it's there and it works so well.
The grimmest part of this playbook, among many grim things, one of the grimmest things about it, but also really cool things about it, is frequently the player does not have narrative authority when the moves fire off. And instead, the keeper playing the husband has the narrative authority. And in one of the moves, the player only gets narrative authority when they get a 12. And that is so that is just like icicle to the heart. Like it's so it reminds me a lot actually of the factotum in the between, because the factotum is always kind of sublimating to the employer character and letting them have the glory and letting them do the thing. In this case, the custodian is sublimating to the husband, and the husband gets the credit, the husband gets the glory, and their own interests and self-regard is absolutely behind them. And yeah, it's really, really dark. I was reading this, and I Chaotic came to one of the workshops, and we talked afterwards about what was then a significantly rougher version of this faith sheet. And I remember telling Chaotic at the time, I was like, this is incredibly bleak, and I don't think people are going to want to play it unless you make certain changes to it. And I think the changes that I see here are good. I think that this is obviously going to take a lot of care at the table, and you have to have a table that's bought into this and wanting to explore these themes. But I think Chaotic just gets away with the darkness having just enough satire in there to make it not a complete kind of misery fest, right? I think they've just managed to kind of to weave through there. It's a powerful piece of writing and game design at the same time, and I really admire it that way. John, what are your thoughts on Dear Dear Husband? I'm curious, as the creator of the setting especially, where does a god like this fit in, or does a god like this fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely one that we talked over a lot. Like you say, it's very heavy, not just in the themes, but mechanically. I think I counted there's 8 different conditions the player can take on that have to be managed on that faith sheet. But the more we talked about it, the more I think it became clear that something that swung so hard for the fences really deserved to be acknowledged. As to how it fits in, both of our shows often get described as a romantic, or at the very least deeply thematically skeptical of traditional family units and traditional expectations around the people that we attach ourselves to. In the Silt verses, most of it deals with parents as almost surrogate gods. So, dealing with parents who are abusive or neglectful or absent. We don't really deal with romantic relationships to the same extent. We did, I think, in our last podcast, I'm in Askew, have a lot more that was about how people searching for connection and searching for the sense that there's nothing wrong with them, that they are where they should be, find themselves entering into a monstrous fiction that traps them more and more. So for me, it wasn't solely about domestic abuse, this faith sheet. It was about how we bind ourselves to people who are wearing a mask, and how that entrapment and that self-entrapment gets tighter and tighter until we become part of the fiction ourselves. So yeah, I thought it fitted beautifully within the setting, and it was something we hadn't touched on within the setting. Like you say, Jason, definitely something that needs to be handled with a lot of care, but I thought it was very conscientious, even on an inevitable path to a very, very dark ending in what it was doing. Very thoughtful, very good, I thought.
With the right group, this is why I play role-playing games. This is what I show up for, right? That like a lot of the public gaming I do, it has a certain kind of veil over it, because it's a very, done in kind of a very public way, especially if it's a mixed public table. But when I'm with a group where we're all cool with going to that dark places, and a lot of my current tables are those groups, when I'm with that group, and we go into that really, really dark territory, you're able to have role-playing experiences that are quite profound, right? That are quite profound and really show you the power of this art and medium. And I think Dear Dear Husband really, really fits that nicely. Like, I would love to see this in the hands of the right player, you know, and the right play group. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Dear Dear Husband?
I mean, I'll be honest, I was surprised to see it show up
I
because,
was
as
too.
has been said, it
Yeah.
is so intense and dark
Yeah.
and so uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if I could necessarily run or play it myself. But the more I thought about it, I respect it for everything that's been said.
Yeah.
But I think what it also adds to the setting, um, you know, it's pointing out just how messed up it is to be bound to a god when you really kind of follow through some of the conclusions and or the implications of the setting. I think sometimes something I think about is when we, because we're writing a role-playing game, we had to gamify certain parts of the setting and say, I am a follower of this god. And in the world as the show presents it, it's not that straightforward. So there can be this element of, you know, having a character sheet with cool powers, and that's really, really fun. But I kind of wonder sometimes if there's a danger of that theme getting lost a little bit. So this definitely just drives home that, like, how terrible that can be, and how wrong that can be. And like, to see that at the table, I could see that being uncomfortable in the same way of being around someone who's like super religious in a really, you know, a bigoted way, a really extreme way. So that could be an interesting element.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%. I feel like I could have this at my table with the right group. And even if it's not universally applicable to every table, there's so much respect for like the swing that this playbook took. And I think it's absolutely worth mentioning. The final prayer on this is dark, but also really good. Your character basically lobotomizes themselves. That hampers their relationship, but then they basically become a saint, become an ongoing danger in the campaign as they begin to wage a war against bias for basically interfering with their perfect little relationship.
The perfect marriage. Yeah. Yeah. It's dark, but so good. Any other final thoughts?
I mean, this would definitely, I mean, like the content warning heads heads the faith sheet. So, I mean, this would normally be one of my lines, but I had to read it because it was very fascinating from having played Bluebeard's Bride, and like I could see a
This is
lot
like
of that
Bluebeard's
stuff
Bride,
coming
the
up.
faith sheet. Yeah.
Pretty much.
It
Bluebird's
really
Bride, the Faith
is.
Sheet, absolutely. And I actually enjoyed that game, even though, again, it's like, you know, usually stuff that I would line or veil or what have you. And, but again, it was just so fascinating with how the moves were, you know, drawn out. And like, you know, you see the progression of how it can go. This person who is falling so deeply into this lie, or, you know, this immersion of faith, you know, as horrible as it is, into this god, and then just being subsumed, and then becoming an arm, like like the emissary, the appendage, and that's it. Like they are no longer themselves, and just part of their god.
Delightfully grim. Okay. Congratulations to Chaotic for winning that track. Let's go to the assignments, our final track. Mads, who is our runner-up in the assignments?
We have Bale's Peak by Ryder Gavin.
Bale's Peak. Tell us about Bale's Peak.
So yeah, this big, huge, infinitely patient mountain shrouded in mist, snow, cloud, and ice. Beyond vision, beyond reason, it towers above life and logic. I mean, that line, I was like, all right, there we go. I mean, I find mountains horrifying myself. I mean, I would never want to get lost on one myself, but this was incredible. Older than the recorded history and divinity alike, Bale's Peak has housed more gods than can possibly be recounted. So, yeah, I just found it fascinating for custodians to come to this place that things have lived and died on this peak. And I'm just like, you know, just for quick notes, I think, yeah, I mean, it's pervasive and increasingly unrestful. And the puns of the conditions are really cool, as well as the names, Meander, Grimeback. Aloysius Petrichor. I mean, really,
Venture
you know?
cultists. Venture
Yes,
cultists is
venture
such a
cultist was
cool
the big one. Yeah,
phrase. Yeah, so
and
good.
like my phrase that came to mind when I read this was terrible majesty. So I mean, it would definitely deserve to be runner up for this.
Rich cultists go to a mountain and die.
Yep.
and
It's all
more and
good.
more are coming. It's a pretty wild assignment. Alex, what are your thoughts on Bale's Peak?
God, I gotta tell you, it was so hard when we deliberated because this one was so at like the edge for like winning. Honestly, it was so close. The prose here, that first, you know, introduction to it is so beautifully
really
and
well written.
evocatively written. Yeah, the writing throughout this assignment is so good, and the setting itself of this mountain. Obviously, we get some callbacks to Chernobyl with the fact that one of the dangers is called not a place of honor, but it is this careless and awe-inspiring in the most like, you know, terrifying way possible location that is dangerous in more than just physical ways. And as Matt's already said, these characters were so well named, and that's like a big thing like for me as like side characters. Like I like a good name, but in the Silt versus setting especially, I'm like, there's something about characters in this universe that they just have interesting names. So having names like Meander Kerrigan or Coda Takeo, these just they flow so well off the tongue that I was just like, I already just want to run them based on like the text. It's the only like real criticism I think we ended up having for it is that the questions in their current state are very confusing and don't seem presentable at the table in the way they're currently written. But that aside, that is a drop in the bucket for how much majesty is presented here. Like I'm in love with it.
The writing is exceptional. I had called out. I think the moments are really really good. I love there's one that's above thick woolen goats traverse the cold stone with ease, seeming to circle an unrecovered corpse in brightly colored winter clothes. That's so good. The paint the scenes are amazing in this. The paint the scene questions do such a good job of telling us like what we need to know about this place. For example, there's one about the base camp. Both shepherds and adventurers alike inhabit the base camp. How can you easily tell which temporary structures belong to the locals as opposed to the tourists? That is great, right? It's telling you straight away that there's this conflict between like the people who live on this mountain and the people who come to this mountain for vainglorious reasons and because of their money, and sort of what separates those things. I also like this paint the scene. No living thing should ever be here. Almost everybody is scared of the upwards path, and now you see why. What terrible thing do you glimpse in the snow haze that renews your fear in the cold? I mean, come on. That's going to be a fun scene. John, why was this a runner-up in the contest?
I mean, as Alex said, I think this could have been the winner. I think we had three that I would have been very happy to have seen in first place. I adored this one. Again, I think a big snowy, spooky mountain was one of the elements that we've never explored and won't get to explore within the podcast. I'm a massive sucker for cryptids, so our Lord in Grey himself, as a kind of shout out to Amphir Lee Moore, the big grey man of the Scottish Cairngorms, I would have been happy with that. But the sense of place is fantastic. The writing, the prose is lush. Just a shout out, I think, to the side characters, not just the names, which are excellent, but they represent, I think, at least 4 different factions between them, and every single side character is interesting and unique and has their own very clearly defined character and outlook. It's a wonderful resource. I would love to pick any one of them out and introduce them to the players. So yeah, really adored and respected it.
The side character quotes are terrific, right? This is just well written all the way through. Yep. I mean, there's a couple of like little mechanical nitpicks that I agree, Alex, that I would make if I was like getting ready to publish this, but that would be my job to fix those things. The writing is exceptional, and that's like what you know that goes a long way here. Gabriel, did you have a chance to look at this one?
Oh yeah, agreed with everything that's been said. I mean, the side characters are so strong. The locations. I like the scale of it a lot, because in a lot of the game we focused on these weird backwoods locations and personal things, and the scale of this is terrifying, and it's implied how this thing could just keep growing, and all these people and gods have just died on here, and it's just terrifying in that sense. Um, the what was it? I like that you could encounter a half-dead custodian, and it implies this is like another team already attempted and failed, and so that just
You're just the
further
next
drives home
ones.
that
Yeah, you're the next ones on the list. Yeah.
it's just
yeah.
that horror of just like mountain climbs in general. And then the moments, or the clues, are also really strong. There's a lot of callbacks to other settings, or other assignments as references to different gods. And moments like the opening of a cave system, almost invisible in the snow, a half buried sign beside it scrawled with "To the Glorious Heart," a clue rather. There's just so many of these really well written clues, which is kind of how I like to approach it, where any one of these could be a whole amazing scene. You could just run with them. So very well done.
I'll say one last thing. Great reward in a memento from the outreached hand of a corpse of the mountain, as if gifted. Ask another custodian to describe it. It's so cool, right? Fabulous. All right, Bale's Peak was our runner up, and that just leaves Alex. Our winner of the assignments is
The winner of the assignments track is The House of Green Delights by Kevin Maku.
fantastic. Tell us about it.
So there is a establishment known as the House of Green Delights in the city of Nesh over across the waters in the Linger Straits. And a young woman has vanished inside this place. Normally that would not be news, but the house devoured the wrong girl this time, Jessica Trace, the daughter of Nesh's mayor. And the House of Green Delights is the haunt of an old goddess of love and intoxicants named Bright Feather. And anyone is welcome to enjoy a glass of the house's green ambrosia in the old mansion's grand foyer lounge. And there are entire floors which one can only access with the house's favor, granted in the form of like masks. So the custodians are basically sent on in like clandestine political mission to go into a foreign country and secure the mayor's daughter, like find her and like save her, for some of that good political favoring and maneuvering in the stage there. And the entire assignment is set inside the House of Green Delights with all of the guests and staff therein.
John, what stuck out to you about this one?
I think in a crowded field of some really, really fantastic assignments, what stood out to me about this was beauty, melancholy, and seductiveness. We had so many very fun, very interesting assignments that just went big on the body horror, lots of grotesquerie lurking in the margins. I think what I adored about this one was just the infiltrating a masked ball with the dangers coming from being seduced by the beauty all around you, being infected by it, but without that necessarily having to result in lots of tentacles and flesh explosions, etc. One moment I absolutely loved from this is in the moments, and it's just a little Solaris-esque hallucination where someone you love or once loved in the past stands at the far end of the hallway, unmasked. They stare back at you, breathless, longing. Lights flicker, green lightning flashes, and they're gone. Just a lovely little moment in an assignment that's absolutely packed with lovely little moments and mechanics. Shout out to the stag, who is a Minotaur-esque angel that is just roaming the corridors. Really, really wonderful, really interesting. Yeah, just lots to chew over in a really, really fun, well-written little assignment.
A thought I do want to throw out there is like it didn't really like hit me in this exact wording until right now is this assignment is probably, as far as I can like recall, the Silt versus like inversion of a haunted house scenario.
I would say this is a between as fuck scenario, right?
Yeah,
really
it's a
good.
god haunted house. Yeah.
Yeah, as the creator of the Between and the person who runs the Between a lot and who participates in or who consumes a lot of like kind of very like sensory rich, delicious, luxuriant, details in media. this spoke to me in a really, really big way. Like, and it's and Kevin did it in ways that are both like on the page, but also ways that are like kind of invoke the mechanics, right? Like that green versus rule is so cool because you do your normal verse, but you have to like add a green element whenever you're in the House of Green Delights, which I thought was really, really clever, right? Mads, what stuck out to you about this one?
Oh, I really loved like play on the mechanics with being able to, if you answer the question, you can take the stag off as a danger. But I mean, the stag is fascinating on their own. And then the special move, petty games. I don't know. There's just something fun about like having a mini game the within the setting, within the assignment, and I just thought that was like really awesome. And it had a very, for me, had a very like very trophy type of feel, but in a house.
Yeah, I really did. Yeah, I know Kevin, pretty well from playing games with Kevin and seeing him on Discord and stuff. And you could absolutely see that, like, wow, Kevin really hangs out with the Gauntlet. Like, and there could not have been a more like playing to most of the audience like scenario than this one, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think there's most of us here, I'm sure John too, but I know the other four of us were really, really primed to love this one. Gabriel, what are your thoughts on the House of Green Delights?
Yeah, I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's sensual, it's dreamlike, and it's refreshing to have that in the setting as well. It just got me thinking about, we explore a lot of the horrors of gods and divinities and what people encounter, but it's also interesting to see like what would like the most lavish, ideal, sensual, version of that be like? What would people ideally like to experience and cultivate? I like how it feels really personal, like was mentioned with the moments. A lot of these questions are directed at your character in this very inward, personal, immediate sense. And that the most of the setting is these different floors of this house. So this, again, the scale is really cool. Like you're exploring. The space is very interesting, but it always feels very directed at your custodian in a different way than I think a lot of the other assignments. Every detail, the atmosphere is so rich.
I love
I really enjoyed that.
single location scenario.
Yep.
I all my games start with a single location scenario, right? Well, that's not true. Brindlewood Bay doesn't, but between and public access do, and the reason why is because I think that there's for one thing, it's really nice because it gives you a chance as a play group to get accustomed to the rules. But also, when you're in a single place, you have to necessarily get into the details of that place, right? Like you have to get into the details of it. You have to talk about the textures. You have to talk about the colors. You have to talk about the smells. You have to get into those details because there's nowhere else to go. Like this is it. This is the one place we're going to be the whole time. And you can see that in the writing of this, right? Like you get this like deeper, richer treatment of this one place as opposed to like 5 or 6 far-flung places, right? Which are more lightly touched. I really appreciated that about it. I do have to call out the alternate names of the god. They're so good, of Brightfeather. The Lady in Gossamer Green, Madame Malachite, the Forlorn Fairy, and be still my beating heart, my darling Chartreuse. Killing me. So good.
Also, speaking of names, I was going to say another thing that really reinforced that dreamlike feeling is how none of the side characters are named except for Jessica, the central character.
Jessica Trace. What a good name.
Trace. Yeah. Everything else is like a moth, a priestess, the staff, and it just reinforces this like not quite fully in reality dream sensation.
It's very dreamy. It's got like Chinatown vibes. It's got noir vibes. It's got it's so good. I mean, man, really
I just want to call out like for the last line and the special move. It's like as we're talking about it's like sensual details and such. It's like the what's this? Depending on how the special move goes, basically. Keeper will decide how this manifests, but however it does, the custodians will find a message from her waiting for them. Looking forward to our next game. And almost like blowing a kiss with the heart. It's like so cool.
Good. Yeah, it's so great. I mean, you're really stepping into another world when you do this assignment, right? You really are. It's really good stuff. Fantastic. Any other thoughts on this one or just the contest in general before we wrap up here?
just respect everyone for, you know, how hard they went with some of their settings. I was thinking multiple times how when I was writing certain material, I was like, we shouldn't have a move that just lets you hallow people. That might be too extreme. And then people are like, nope, sacrifice a person, bury them, hallow them.
Yeah.
So they just went for it, and I respect that.
Yeah. There's a lot of like just go for it energy in these, which I really love. Yeah. And this setting supports it, right? I think that's that's something. This is a side thing, but I'm running 2 campaigns of TSV right now, and every time, every session, I'm always delighted by how hardy both the rules and the setting are. Like whatever the players come up with, it handles it, right? Like it all fits and it works. And it's because of that really excellent blend that John and co created that's like, it's the horror and the satire. And I think it's the satire that makes the rest of it work, right? Like I think if you didn't have that element, a lot of these like bigger, like more outlandish, like world breaky elements would not work. And I'm always I'm delighted at the storytelling. Yeah, I'm delighted in the storytelling that you can get in this game. So good. And I think these entries all reflect it.
The empathy and the humanity grounds it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like from the game's standpoint, that's really where I think that's the one thing that I think we can be really proud of is these faith sheets and these custodians, you get to tell a really deep story about each of these characters, right? Like you get to have this really, really deep treatment and I've been just like in awe of like my players in both of my campaigns as they go through and they reveal a little bit more about their characters. It all feels so good, and it does really feel like very, very faithful to the podcast. And so I couldn't be more delighted. This contest was great, folks. Judges, thank you so much for your efforts and your great picks. It was really, really nice of you all to do this. And Gabriel, obviously, thank you for all the support you gave to the Discord, for folks writing their entries. And for folks who entered the contest, congratulations for doing this. Obviously we didn't have time to talk about all 80 entries, but from my read of things, the entries were in general, like the standard was really, really high. The quality level was so high. And even if you didn't like win or place or whatever, you should feel really, really proud about what you've done, because I think that like one of the toughest things that you can do, and I say this as a creative person, one of the toughest things you can do is take your creative work and put it out into the world to be judged, to be read, possibly to be discussed in a public way. And so that takes a lot of courage, and you should feel really, really happy that you did that. And I hope that you got something out of it. I hope you found the process to be really engaging and gratifying, as much as it was for gratifying as it was for me to read what you did. And so I'm delighted personally. And so congrats again to all the winners. Thank you, everyone. And let's go and wave goodbye to everybody. Bye, everybody.